The acrid smell hit Karen Morrison like a slap across her perfectly powdered face as she stormed across her neighbor's lawn at dawn, garden hose in hand. 24 hours earlier, she'd been the queen of Maple Grove Drive HOA president, neighborhood watch coordinator, the woman who made grown men tremble when their grass grew an inch too tall. Now she stood frozen in her designer slippers, watching her prize-winning lawn transform into something that looked like a crime scene, the purple stains spreading like spilled wine across her emerald paradise. Behind her kitchen window, Marcus Chen smiled for the first time in 3 years, his chemistry degree finally serving a purpose beyond corporate lab reports. Sometimes the best revenge wasn't served cold, it was served through a sprinkler system. One perfectly calculated chemical reaction at a time. Marcus Chen pressed his face against the cool glass of his kitchen window, watching the familiar scene unfold in the pre-dawn darkness. There she was, again, Karen Morrison, HOA president and self-appointed guardian of neighborhood perfection, creeping across his backyard like some suburban cat burglar. Her pristine white robe fluttered behind her as she made her way to his outdoor spigot, dragging that ridiculous 100-foot garden hose she'd bought specifically for these clandestine water theft missions. "Third time this week," Marcus muttered, gripping his coffee mug so tightly his knuckles went white. The ceramic was warm against his palms, but it did nothing to quell the cold fury building in his chest. Petty tyranny. 3 years of passive-aggressive notes slipped under his door about his substandard lawn maintenance. 3 years of her measuring his grass with an actual ruler, documenting every blade that dared grow beyond the HOA's regulation, 2.5 inches. 3 years of her reporting him for everything from his mailbox being inadequately shined to his garden gnomes being aesthetically disruptive to neighborhood harmony. But this water theft was different. This was personal. Marcus's lawn was dying, had been dying for months, while Karen's remained a verdant masterpiece that made the other neighbors stop and stare with envy. He'd tried everything, different fertilizers, soil amendments, even hired a professional landscaping service that cost him half his monthly salary. Nothing worked. His grass remained patchy and brown, while hers grew more lush by the day. The revelation had come 2 weeks ago when he'd gotten up early to water his struggling begonias. He'd caught Karen red-handed, her hose connected to his spigot, filling her elaborate sprinkler system with his water, while her own mysteriously remained broken. When he'd confronted her, she'd had the audacity to claim she was borrowing water for a neighborhood beautification project. "It's for the greater good, Marcus," she'd said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Some of us understand the importance of maintaining property values. Your lawn is an eyesore. At least this way, one of us can contribute to the aesthetic appeal of Maple Grove Drive." The memory made his jaw clench. He'd reported the theft. To the city, to the HOA board, even to the police. But Karen Morrison had been HOA president for 8 years running. She had connections, allies, and an army of neighbor spies who worshipped at the altar of her perfect landscaping. His complaints had disappeared into bureaucratic black holes, while his water bills continued to skyrocket. Outside, Karen had finished connecting her hose. She straightened up, brushing imaginary dirt from her manicured hands, and surveyed his backyard with the proprietary air of a conquering general. Even in the dim light, Marcus could see her self-satisfied smirk. That's when something inside him snapped. Marcus Chen had a PhD in chemistry from MIT. He'd spent 15 years developing water treatment solutions for industrial clients, specializing in chemical reactions that could alter pH levels, mineral content, and even color properties of water systems. His garage was filled with compounds and equipment that most people couldn't even pronounce, let alone understand. For 3 years, he'd been the victim. The mild-mannered neighbor who absorbed Karen's abuse with quiet dignity. But as he watched her turn on his water too, feed her perfect lawn, he realized something profound. He was done being the victim. Marcus set down his coffee mug and walked purposefully to his garage. The automatic door opener hummed to life, revealing shelves lined with chemical containers, pH testing equipment, and measurement devices. He'd been planning this moment for weeks, ever since Karen's last theft, running calculations and chemical formulas in his head during boring board meetings at work. He selected 3 containers, ferric chloride, aluminum sulfate, and his piece de resistance, pH indicator compound that would create a delayed reaction color change. Nothing harmful, nothing that would permanently damage anything except Karen's pride. Just a little chemistry lesson about cause and effect. Marcus mixed the compounds with precise measurements, creating a solution that would be virtually undetectable in small quantities. The ferric chloride would bind with organic compounds in the soil, creating temporary but dramatic color changes. The aluminum sulfate would alter the soil's pH just enough to stress the grass without killing it. And the indicator compound would ensure that Karen's theft would be literally written across her lawn in living color. He approached his outdoor spigot where Karen's hose remained connected like a parasite. The woman herself had retreated to her back porch, probably timing the watering session with the obsessive precision she applied to everything else. Marcus carefully introduced his chemical cocktail into the water line, calculating the dilution rates and flow patterns that would carry his message directly to Karen's sprinkler system. The beauty of chemistry, Marcus reflected as he made his final adjustments, was its inevitability. Mix the right compounds under the right conditions, and the results were as predictable as sunrise. Karen Morrison was about to learn that every action had an equal and opposite reaction. He retreated to his kitchen window and waited. Across the property line, Karen's elaborate sprinkler system began its morning ritual. She stood on her porch like a general reviewing her troops, clearly imagining the envy of her neighbors as they witnessed another day of her horticultural supremacy. Marcus checked his watch. The chemical reaction would take approximately 8 hours to manifest fully. By tomorrow morning, Karen Morrison would discover that stealing water carried a price she'd never calculated. The first phase of his revenge was complete. Phase 2 would begin when Karen saw what her theft had truly cost her. As the sun crested the horizon, painting Maple Grove Drive in shades of gold and amber, Marcus Chen smiled for the first time. In 3 years, sometimes the best solutions required a little chemistry and a lot of patience. Karen Morrison had stolen water for the last time. Karen Morrison's morning routine was as precise as a Swiss timepiece. 5:30 a.m., wake up, no alarm needed. Single origin, ground fresh. 6:30 a.m., inspect the kingdom. She stepped onto her back porch in her silk robe and Italian leather slippers. The morning sun cast long shadows across Maple Grove Drive, and she breathed deeply, ready to bask in the glory of her immaculate lawn. Acrid, with an underlying sweetness that reminded her of rotting fruit mixed with industrial cleaner. Karen's perfectly composed features twisted in disgust as she covered her nose with her sleeve. What in God's name? The words died in her throat as her gaze fell upon her lawn. Taken her 8 years to perfect, the lawn that had won the HOA's Yard of the Year award 4 times running. The lawn that was supposed to be her crowning achievement in a life built on maintaining appearances. It was purple, not just purple, a sickly, unnatural shade that seemed to pulse and shift in the morning light. Patches of violent magenta mixed with deep plum streaks that spread across her grass like spilled paint. The color was so vivid, so wrong, that it seemed to assault her eyes. Karen stumbled forward, her slippers sliding on the dew-dampened deck. No, 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 no. She ran barefoot onto the lawn, her silk robe flying behind her like a banner of surrender. The grass felt wrong under her feet, slimy, almost viscous, as if the very nature of the turf had been fundamentally altered. The purple coloration was worse, up close, revealing intricate patterns that followed the exact spray pattern of her sprinkler system. "This isn't possible," she whispered, dropping to her knees. The smell was overwhelming, this closa chemical cocktail that made her eyes water and her throat burn. She grabbed handfuls of purple grass, as if she could somehow squeeze the color out of it through sheer force of will. Her phone appeared in her hands as if by magic, fingers flying across the screen as she called Jerry Hoffman, her landscaper. The phone rang once, twice. "Karen, it's not even 7 a.m. This better be. My lawn is purple, Jerry." The words exploded out of her with such force that a neighbor's dog started barking. "It's purple, and it smells like a chemical plant exploded." Silence stretched across the line. Happened to my sprinkler system, or the water, or Karen's voice cracked as the full magnitude of the disaster hit her. Today was the monthly HOA board meeting. Today, every neighbor on Maple Grove Drive would see her perfect lawn transformed into a toxic wasteland. "Down, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't touch anything else." But Karen was already moving, driven by panic and desperate hope that this was somehow fixable. She turned on her garden hose and aimed it at the worst patch of purple grass, praying that water would wash away whatever had caused this nightmare. The hose sputtered, then produced a stream of clear water that seemed normal enough. But as it hit the purple grass, something extraordinary happened. "Oh my God," Karen breathed, watching the pink water pool around her feet. "What is this?" Across the property line, a kitchen window caught the morning sun, mug in hand, watching her with an expression she'd never seen before. He was smiling, not the polite, submissive smile she was used to from him. This was something else entirely, a satisfied, almost predatory expression that made her blood run cold. "Marcus!" she screamed, abandoning all pretense of dignity. "Anything." His smile widened. Karen stormed across both lawns, her purple-stained feet leaving bizarre footprints in her wake. She pounded on his back door with both fists, each blow echoing across the quiet neighborhood. "I know you can hear me." The door opened so suddenly that Karen stumbled forward, nearly falling into Marcus's arms. He caught her with one steady hand, his expression shifting to one of mock concern. "Karen, my goodness, you look upset and colorful. Don't you dare play innocent with me," she snarled, jerking away from his touch. "What did you do to my lawn?" Marcus tilted his head, the picture of confused innocence. "I'm sorry. What are you suggesting?" "You know exactly what I'm suggesting. You did something to my sprinkler system. You poisoned my lawn." "That's a very serious accusation, Karen. Do you have any proof?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Karen's mind raced, trying to construct a logical argument for what she knew in her bones to be true. But the evidence was circumstantial at best, the chemical disaster that had befallen only her property, affecting only the areas watered by her sprinkler system, which had been connected to his water supply. His stolen water supply, the realization, hit her like a physical blow, Marcus knew. Marcus stepped closer, and for the first time in their 3-year conflict, Karen found herself taking a step back. There was something different about him this morning. "Karen," he said quietly, "I want you to think very carefully about what you're accusing me of. Because if you're suggesting that someone has been using my water without permission, well, that would be theft, wouldn't it?" The words hit their mark with surgical precision. Karen's face flushed red beneath her carefully applied makeup, and Marcus could see the exact moment she realized the trap she'd walked into. "I was borrowing, stealing," Marcus corrected gently. "And if someone has been stealing my water for weeks, using it to maintain their own property while mine suffers, well, I suppose karma has a way of working these things out." Karen opened her mouth to respond, but Jerry Hoffman's landscaping truck rumbled into her driveway, engine diesel loud in the morning quiet. The sound seemed to break whatever spell had been building between them. "This isn't over," Karen hissed. Marcus's smile returned, sharp as a blade. "No, Karen, I don't think it is." In the grass, Marcus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Phase 2 was complete. Karen now knew that her actions had consequences, and more importantly, she knew that he was responsible. But she couldn't prove it, and that was the most beautiful part of all. Jerry Hoffman emerged from his truck, take one look at Karen's purple lawn, and actually stagger backward in shock. Marcus chuckled and refilled his coffee mug. Karen Morrison was about to learn that some lessons couldn't be washed away with a garden hose. Jerry Hoffman had been landscaping for 37 years. He'd seen everything from fungal infections that turned at 7:15 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, staring at what appeared to be a crime scene masquerading as a lawn. He questioned everything he thought he knew about horticulture. "Jesus Christ, Karen," he breathed, pulling a handkerchief over his nose. "What kind of chemical warfare are we dealing with here?" Karen paced frantically beside him, her silk robe now stained with purple grass residue and morning dew. "That's what I'm paying you to figure out. Can you fix it? Please tell me you can fix it." Jerry knelt carefully at the edge of the purple zone, pulling on latex gloves before touching anything. The grass felt wrong under his fingers, but transformed, like it had been fundamentally altered at a molecular level. "This isn't natural," he said, standing up and backing away. "Karen, I'm going to need to call in a soil specialist. That psychopath next door. Did he poison my lawn because we had a disagreement about water usage?" Jerry's weathered face creased with suspicion. What kind of disagreement? Before Karen could answer, The sound of approaching vehicles filled the morning air. Not just one car, but several, their engines growing louder as they turned onto Maple Grove Drive. "Oh no," Karen whispered, her face going pale beneath her foundation. "Oh no, no, no." The first car belonged to Margaret Whitfield, president of the Maple Grove Garden Club and Karen's primary rival for neighborhood social supremacy. Margaret emerged from her silver sedan like a general surveying a battlefield, her perfectly coiffed gray hair catching the morning light. The second car disgorged the Hendersons from 3 houses down, followed by their teenage twins who immediately began taking photos with their phones. The third car brought Mrs. Chun Marcus's elderly mother. "Karen, dear," Margaret called out, her voice dripping with false concern. "We heard there was some kind of ... incident. Are you quite all right?" The gathering crowd formed a semicircle around Karen's purple disaster, maintaining a respectful distance but clearly fascinated by the spectacle. Karen could see the barely contained glee in their faces after years of her rigid HOA enforcement and superior attitude. A minor sprinkler malfunction? Malfunction? Margaret stepped closer, her nose wrinkling at the chemical smell. "Dear, this looks like a toxic waste dump. Are you sure it's safe for the children to be this close?" The Henderson twins immediately stepped back, their phones still recording. Karen could already imagine the videos spreading across social media. "HOA Karen's lawn goes purple. You won't believe what happened next." "Jerry!" Karen hissed, grabbing her landscaper's arm. "And frankly, I'm not sure I want to be liable for trying. This needs professional hazmat assessment." Hazmat. Margaret's eyebrows shot up. "Oh my goodness, Karen, have you contacted the Environmental Protection Agency? This could be affecting the groundwater." A murmur of concern rippled through the growing crowd. More neighbors were arriving, drawn by the commotion and the unmistakable smell of chemical disaster. Karen watched in horror as her carefully maintained reputation crumbled in real time. "There's no environmental hazard," she snapped. "It's just ... it's just a lawn treatment gone wrong." "What kind of treatment turns grass purple?" asked Jim Henderson, pulling out his own phone to document the scene. That's when Marcus Chen emerged from his house. He moved with casual confidence, coffee mug in hand, wearing khakis and a polo shirt as if this were any ordinary morning. The crowd parted slightly as he approached, and Karen noticed several neighbors greeting him with friendly waves, something that had never happened before. "Morning, everyone," Marcus said pleasantly. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Margaret Whitfield's sharp eyes darted between Marcus and Karen's purple lawn. As the neighborhood's unofficial gossip coordinator, she had an uncanny ability to sense drama and trace it to its source. "Marcus, dear," she said sweetly, "have you noticed any unusual odors or—" Marcus made a show of sniffing the air thoughtfully. "Now that you mention it, there has been an unusual smell. I was actually wondering if someone might be having plumbing issues." His gaze met Karen's across the purple wasteland that had once been her pride and joy. The look that passed between them was electric, with unspoken warfare. The suggestion was innocent enough, but Karen caught the subtle emphasis on your sprinkler system. Marcus's mother knew. Of course she knew. "My sprinkler system is fine," Karen said tightly. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying just the right note of neighborly concern. "Because I've noticed some unusual activity with my water pressure lately, almost like someone else was using my supply." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Margaret Whitfield's eyes lit up with predatory interest. "Your water supply. Karen, you're not. You wouldn't be." "I was borrowing water for neighborhood beautification. My lawn is an asset to this community. Unlike some people who let their property look like an abandoned lot, the outburst was a tactical disaster." Every phone in the crowd was now pointed at her, recording her meltdown for posterity. But worse than the recording was the silence that followed the judgment in her neighbors' eyes as they realized she'd just confessed to theft. Marcus stepped forward, his expression shifting to one of hurt disappointment. "Karen, the performance was masterful." Marcus managed to sound wounded and generous at the same time, painting himself as the victim of Karen's selfishness while magnanimously avoiding direct confrontation. "If you needed water, you could have just asked," he continued. "I would have been happy to help a neighbor in need." Margaret Whitfield actually gasped. "Karen Morrison, are you telling us you've been stealing water from this poor man?" "It wasn't stealing, But even as Karen said it, she could hear how hollow the words sounded. Around her, the faces of her neighbors reflected disappointment, disapproval, and in some cases, barely concealed delight at her downfall. Jerry Hoffman cleared his throat uncomfortably. The suggestion hit Karen like a physical blow. Insurance. Lawyers. This was no longer just about a purple lawn. This was about liability. Marcus drained his coffee mug and smiled sadly at the assembled crowd. Well, I suppose these things have a way of working themselves out. As he walked back toward his house, Karen noticed something that made her blood run cold. His lawn she'd spent 3 years mocking and criticizing, receiving proper water and care, while hers had been subjected to whatever chemical nightmare had turned it purple. The crowd began to disperse, neighbors drifting back to their homes with phones full of incriminating footage and mouths full of gossip. Margaret Whitfield paused at the edge of Karen's driveway, her smile sharp as a scalpel. "You know, dear," she said quietly, "the garden club has been looking for a new president, someone with more ... integrity. I do hope you'll consider stepping down before the next election." As Margaret walked away, Karen stood alone in her purple wasteland, the chemical smell burning her nostrils and the weight of complete social ruin settling on her shoulders like a shroud. Marcus Chen had won not just the battle, but the entire war, and everyone in Maple Grove Drive knew it. By noon, Karen's purple lawn had become the most photographed yard in Maple Grove Drive's history. The images were spreading across social media like wildfire. Hashtag Purple Lawngate, hashtag HOA Karen, hashtag Chemical Karen. Each post came with increasingly creative captions that made Karen's stomach churn as she scrolled through them on her phone. Local HOA Hitler gets what she deserves. On Karen's stolen water main, hashtag Karma Karen slammed her phone face down on her granite kitchen counter, but the damage was already done. Unraveling thread by thread, and Marcus Chen was sitting in his house like a spider in the center of his web. The doorbell rang, and Karen's heart jumped. Through the frosted glass, she could see 2 figures in dark uniforms. Police. She opened the door to find Officer Rodriguez and Detective Kim, both wearing expressions of professional neutrality that somehow managed to convey mild amusement. "Ms. Morrison, we've received several calls about a possible environmental hazard on your property. Mind if we take a look?" "Of course," Karen said, trying to inject authority into her voice. "And while you're here, I'd like to file a complaint about criminal vandalism. My neighbor deliberately poisoned my lawn." Detective Kim raised an eyebrow. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have evidence?" The smell had intensified, creating a chemical fog that hung over the yard like a malevolent presence. "Jesus," Officer Rodriguez muttered, pulling out his radio. "We're going to need environmental services out here. Someone contaminated my sprinkler system with chemicals, and you suspect your neighbor." Detective Kim pulled out a notepad, pen poised to write. "I know it was him. Marcus Chen. He's a chemist, and he was angry because we had a dispute about water usage." "What kind of dispute?" Karen's mouth went dry. "He claimed I was using his water without permission. Were you?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Karen felt trapped between admitting to theft and lying to police officers. "I was borrowing small amounts for neighborhood beautification purposes," she said carefully. Detective Kim's pen stopped moving. "It was hardly theft." "We share a property line, and I was improving the community, ma'am," Officer Rodriguez interrupted, her feet. This was supposed to be about Marcus's criminal vandalism, not her water usage. "But he poisoned my lawn. That's assault. That's chemical terrorism." "Do you have any proof that Mr. Chen was involved?" Detective Kim asked. "He was watching from his window this morning. He was smiling. He knew this was going to happen." "Watching from his own window and smiling isn't illegal, ma'am." Karen's frustration boiled over. "Then test the chemicals. Find his fingerprints on my sprinkler system." Detective Kim closed his notepad. "Ms. Morrison, we'll have environmental services test your soil for hazardous materials. But I have to tell you, based on what you've admitted today, Mr. Chen would have more grounds for a complaint against you than vice versa." The officers left to canvass the neighborhood, and Karen watched from her kitchen window as they knocked on Marcus's door. She saw him emerge, coffee mug in hand as always, greeting, Them with the same polite concern he'd shown the neighbors that morning. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. 20 minutes during which Marcus gestured helpfully toward Karen's purple lawn. Discuss his victimization at Karen's hands. When they emerged, both officers were nodding sympathetically. Marcus shook their hands like they were old friends, and Officer Rodriguez actually patted him on the shoulder in a gesture of solidarity. Margaret Whitfield, another buzz. Karen, the board is calling an emergency meeting tonight. Your conduct requires immediate discussion. What the hell is going on? On Jessica, Karen's daughter, the messages kept coming, each one another nail in the coffin of her reputation. But it was the final text that made her blood run cold. Karen, this is Jerry. After talking to my lawyer, neighbors have asked me to bid on their landscaping. Sorry, Jerry Hoffman. Jerry was abandoning her. Her landscaper, who she'd single-handedly made successful through years of referrals and recommendations, was cutting ties to protect his business. Karen sank into her leather chair, staring out at her purple wasteland. In less than 12 hours, her entire world had collapsed. Her reputation was destroyed, her position in the community threatened. Her own daughter was questioning her judgment, and her landscaper had fired her. But as Karen sat in her ruined kingdom, something dark and determined began to grow in her chest. Marcus thought he was clever, hiding behind plausible deniability and chemical knowledge. He thought he could destroy her life while maintaining his innocent facade. He was wrong. Karen pulled out her laptop and began typing. If Marcus wanted to play chemical warfare, she would show him what real warfare looked like. She had connections he'd never dreamed of: city officials, environmental regulators, zoning commissioners who owed her favors from years of HOA cooperation. Marcus Chen had made one critical mistake. He'd left her alive to fight back. And Karen Morrison didn't lose wars. She'd just changed the battlefield. By evening, she had made 17 phone calls and sent 23 emails. Someone's life. Sometimes the most devastating reactions happened in city planning offices and regulatory agencies, where the right word from the right person could turn someone's property into a bureaucratic nightmare. Marcus wanted to play games. Fine, Karen. Morrison was about to show him how the real power structure in Maple Grove Drive actually worked. Marcus Chen was reviewing quarterly reports when his doorbell rang at 8:47 a.m. Through his front window, he could see a city van parked in his driveway and 2 officials in hard hats, examining clipboards with the grim efficiency of people who destroyed lives for a living. Mr. Chen, I'm Inspector Davidson from City Code Enforcement, and this is Inspector Walsh from Environmental Health. We've received multiple complaints about your property. Marcus blinked, his coffee mug halfway. To his lips, complaints about what? Inspector Davidson consulted his clipboard with theatrical precision. Illegal chemical storage, potential groundwater contamination, unpermitted laboratory operations, and zoning violations related to residential use of industrial materials. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. He set down his coffee mug, his mind racing through the implications. His garage workshop filled with perfectly legal chemical supplies for his legitimate consulting work could easily be misinterpreted by bureaucrats looking for violations. I'd like to see your permits for chemical storage, Inspector Walsh said, pulling out a tablet and stylus. Also, any documentation for laboratory equipment, disposal methods for hazardous materials, and proof of proper ventilation systems. I don't run a laboratory, Marcus said carefully. I do consulting work from my home office. The chemicals in my garage are for legitimate research purposes. Research purposes. Inspector Davidson's eyebrows rose. Are you licensed for residential research operations? Do you have proper containment systems? What about emergency protocols for chemical spills? Marcus realized with growing horror what was happening. Karen hadn't just reported him, she'd weaponized the city's regulatory apparatus against him, turning his perfectly legal hobby into a bureaucratic minefield. I'd like to see the complaints, Marcus said. Inspector Walsh turned his tablet screen toward Marcus, showing a detailed report that made his blood run cold. Someone, obviously current, documented every chemical container in his garage, listed every piece of equipment visible through his windows, and provided photographs of what appeared to be a sophisticated laboratory operation. The photographs were damning. Taken from specific angles and enhanced for maximum impact, they made his garage workshop look like something from a methamphetamine operation. beakers and measuring equipment appeared sinister under the photographer's expert eye, while his chemical storage containers seemed to glow with malevolent potential. "These were taken without my consent," Marcus said, "from public areas," Inspector Davidson replied. The complainant was very thorough. She also provided documentation of unusual odors, potential groundwater contamination, and what appears to be evidence of chemical testing on neighboring properties. Marcus's throat went dry. Chemical testing. Inspector Walsh swiped to another screen, showing photographs of Karen's purple lawn. But the images had been carefully cropped and edited to suggest that the contamination extended beyond her property line. Captions claimed that toxic runoff was threatening the entire neighborhood's water supply. "Mr. Chen, we're going to need to conduct a full inspection of your property. This includes your garage, any chemical storage areas, and soil testing around your foundation. Do you have a warrant? We don't need one for code enforcement inspections. You can refuse, but that will result in immediate citations in a court." Order. Marcus stepped aside, watching helplessly as the inspectors began their systematic destruction of his life. They photographed everything, measured distances between chemical containers and property lines, tested soil samples with portable equipment, and documented every potential violation they could imagine. Inspector Davidson emerged from the garage, shaking his head. "Mr. Chen, this is a serious situation. You have industrial-grade chemicals stored in a residential area without proper permits. Some of these compounds require special handling licenses. They're all legal to purchase and possess," Marcus protested. "Purchase and possess, yes, but not to store in residential areas in these quantities, and definitely not without proper safety equipment and documentation." The inspection lasted 3 hours. 3 hours during which Marcus watched his comfortable life transform into a legal nightmare. When the inspectors finally left, they handed him a citation packet an inch thick, filled with violations that carried fines totaling over $15,000. But the citations were just the beginning. At 2 p.m., a truck from Hazmat Solutions pulled into his driveway. The driver, a weathered man named Pete, emerged wearing a full chemical suit that made him look like he was responding to a nuclear disaster. "Got a call about a residential chemical cleanup?" Pete said through his face mask. "Environmental Health says you need emergency containment and disposal. Emergency." Marcus stared at the man in disbelief. "I've had them for years." "Sorry, pal. Once the city flags it as a hazmat situation, everything has to be treated as dangerous until proven otherwise. That's going to run you about $8,000 for proper disposal." Marcus felt the walls closing in around him. $8,000 to dispose of chemicals that had cost him less than $2,000 to acquire. But refusing would mean additional citations and possible criminal charges. As Pete began loading chemical containers into specialized disposal units, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed his employer's number. Marcus's boss's voice sounded strained. "I just got a very disturbing call from the city. Something about illegal chemical operations at your home address." "It's a misunderstanding, Jim. Someone filed false complaints." "Marcus, you know our company policy about employees involved in chemical violations. We can't have our consultants associated with environmental crimes." The words hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. "Jim, these aren't crimes. It's all legal equipment and materials. I'm sure it is, but the optics are terrible. HR is recommending immediate suspension pending investigation." "I'm sorry, Marcus. Take some time to sort this out, and we'll reassess when the legal situation is resolved." The call ended, leaving Marcus staring at his phone in stunned silence. In 6 hours, Karen Morrison had managed to destroy his home workshop, cost him $15,000 in fines and cleanup fees, and get him suspended from his job. But she wasn't finished. At 4 p.m., a truck from the water department arrived to inspect his main line connection. At 5 p.m., the fire department showed up to evaluate whether his garage represented a fire hazard to neighboring properties. At 6 p.m., zoning enforcement arrived to investigate complaints about unpermitted home business operations. Each visit resulted in additional citations, additional fees, and additional bureaucratic nightmares that would take months to resolve. Marcus stood in his driveway as the sun set over Maple Grove Drive, watching the parade of official vehicles finally depart. His garage stood empty, stripped of everything that had given him purpose and intellectual satisfaction. His job was gone, his savings depleted, and his reputation in shambles. Across the property line, Karen Morrison stood at her kitchen window, watching his destruction with the same satisfied smile he'd worn the morning she discovered her purple lawn. But as Marcus surveyed the wreckage of his life, something cold and calculating began to form in his mind. Karen had made a critical error in her counterattack. She'd escalated their conflict beyond the realm of neighborhood disputes into something much more dangerous. She'd made it personal. She'd threatened his livelihood, his home, and his future. And Marcus Chen was about to show her that a chemist with nothing left to lose was far more dangerous than one who played by society's rules. Karen Morrison had wanted total war. She was about to get it.